Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the interview series of South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. I'm your host, Furqan Ahmed, working as Senior Research Associate. It's a very special occasion for us to have Dr. Goldy George from India. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. We'll have a brief discussion with Dr. George on various issues pertaining to minorities, caste, and their struggles in South Asia in general, and in India in particular. So let me introduce our guest so that we'll move to our question answer sessions. Dr. Goldy George holds a PhD in social sciences from from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He has been an activist since 1989 for the past 33 years, working on indigenous, Dalits, and Adivasi rights. After working with different organizations in 1998, he founded the Dalit Study Circle, which is DCS, Dalit Mukti Morcha, DMM in 2002, Social Institute for Research and Action, which is SIRSA in 2004. He co-founded the Center for Just Peace in Asia, CJPA, based in Hong Kong. In 2015, he founded the Chhattisgarh Citizen People's Action Forum, and in 2018, he formed Progressive Christian Forum. He has to his credit 4 books, 4 booklets, and 35 research articles, chapters, research journals, books, as well as nearly 500 articles in mainstream, national, and popular media, such as the Hindu, Hindustan Times, Deccan Herald, Dainik Hindustan, People's Reporter, Deshbandhu. I hope I'm pronouncing those names right. Dainik Chhattisgarh, Central Chronicle, Counter Currents, People's Voice, and Forward Press, as well as many others between 2002 and 2010. He has been a regular columnist at Deshbandhu. Dr. George has organized several international conferences, consultations, seminars, and workshops. He made many keynote presentations in countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Belgium, South Africa, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and South Korea. At the national level, he has been working and associated with organizations and movements in states like Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and Kerala. He has done many researches in many of these states too. He has addressed, delivered lectures in many public spaces, platforms, and university spaces in over 500 national programs. Technically, he's an expert on research methodology with a specific focus on ethnography and anthropology. Between 2016 and 18, he has been a member of ICSSR, which is Indian Council of Social Science and Research, an expert panel on research methodology. Dr. George was also a visiting faculty at Tata Institute for Social Sciences, Mumbai and Taljapur, Delhi University, Utkal University, Bhubaneswar. He has been the founder and chief editor of Uni- uh, Journal of People's Study. Currently, he is the research director of Phule Center for Bahujan Studies, as well as contributing editor at Forward Press. He used to be a contributing editor at Forward Press, New Delhi. Through his community involvements in actions, public lectures, writing, and teachings, he has emerged as a voice of justice. So that was his introduction. I would now move on to our first question in regards to this topic. Sir, what are the various kinds of discriminations being faced by the minority groups in India and in general in Chhattisgarh in particular? What cultural barriers do these groups have? And what are the recent trends of discrimination? And what role have you been playing in curtailing discrimination against these groups?
Thank you for raising these questions. These questions are very, very vital and very important questions, to be honest. Now, when When you ask the question that what are the problems faced by the minority communities in India, the first and most prominent aspect is like how and why is that a community becomes a minority community? How does it become a minority community? Is it like just natural or by default, or is there another method by which it is being becoming a minority community? Now, when you look at the whole case, particularly when the the development or the survival or the existence of a minority community is only possible when the majority is a sensitive one, whether it's a religious minority, whether it is a linguistic minority, whether it is any sort of a minority. There are so many minorities that we come across these days in our time. So that is the most primary thing that we need to understand. Unless and until we have a very sensible majority in place, the problems being faced by minorities in any country or any nation would not be resolved. So as a prelude, when I make this point, um, I all the time would want to also say that it is not that the minorities in any country are having a good time. In most of the countries, minorities are in a bad shape, in a difficult phase. But when you specifically look at the question of India, the case of India, it has a specific context. The context is like this, that there are reasons for how and why the minorities or the people have become a minority. The making of the minority itself is the question. In India, for instance, like there are minority groups such as Muslims, Christians, then there's Buddhists, Jain, Sikh, and Parsi. So these are the minority groups that we have in India. It is not that all these groups are totally discriminated. It is not true. It is not correct that all of them are discriminated. There is a pattern of discrimination. It is not just discrimination. There is a subtle pattern of violence that is conducted on these groups. So these violences and the discrimination and the application. So discrimination is not a watertight component. It comes as a package. It comes as a package alongside discrimination. There is violence. There is legal action. There is arrest. You know, so it comes as a package, and this does not, culminate into, or it doesn't actually get exercised over all the minority communities. I'm specifically talking about the religious minorities. It doesn't actually engage with all the religious minorities, and there is a critical reason for that. I'll tell you the reason. So if you understand the reason, you will also be enabled to understand the problems of the other minorities who are facing, the crisis. The reason is that there are three minority groups which are considered as an extension of Hinduism. For instance, one is Buddhism, second is Jainism, or third is Sikhism. So it is either considered as an extension of Hinduism or otherwise considered as friendly, religion of Hinduism, which does not diametrically go against it. The other religion, which is Zoroastrianism, the Parsi people who follow it. So the Zoroastrianism is an alien land. It is like a house. It is like a house which has no windows and there is no doors. So nobody is supposed to go out and nobody is allowed to come in. Now, although what I earlier said that Buddhism is considered as an extension, for instance, I'm specifically looking at Buddhism, but of late, the Ambedkarite movement has thoroughly, rewritten this phenomenal understanding. So the Ambedkarite movement, which in a way or other has been a movement against the whole notion of caste. So that movement eventually culminated to a level where Dr. Ambedkar himself adapted Buddhism as an alternative to Hinduism. What he said is that what he believed and said is that a religion that does not value every being as an equal unit cannot be my religion. So this was the belief by which he moved away from he I mean officially denounced Hinduism. He officially denounced in the 22 vows that he gave on 14th October 1956 in Nagpur, along with 5 lakh people. The 22 vows consistently speaks about it. It's like specifically speaks that no Hindu gods would be my god hereafter. So that way you can see the idea of Buddhism or the Navayana Buddhism in the post Ambedkar phase has also considerably emerged as a challenge to Hinduism. But howsoever, that being an Eastern religion or it being a religion which is assumed to be having an Indian origin, many of the experts and people believe that we can still be able to contain it with the Upanishads and the theory of Advaita Siddhanta. Okay, so the theory of Advaita Siddhanta of Hinduism and the Upanishads can be applied to the overall idea of Buddhism. Now, two specific religions, do not have the so-called Eastern origin, which is one is Christianity and the other is Islam. So when you talk about the kind of violence unleashed on them. So the reason is that one is that they say what they say is like this is actually a foreign religion. Hmm. Second is that this is like not only foreign but also alien religion. Third is that it speaks against our religion, which is Hinduism. Fourth is that if so there are like a subtle way of arguing like why this is foreign and I mean to be honest if a religion should be converted into geopolitical zones, into it will not be going beyond a boundary. So in that case, Hinduism should not be going to Sri Lanka. In that case, Hinduism should not be going to parts of Malaysia, parts of Indonesia, parts of the West Indian, uh, the whole of West Indies. It should not be going. So these are basically the problems of the argument. A philosophy, a religious philosophy, and the faith cannot be tied up into geopolitical or geocultural boundaries. So that will always travel. It will travel naturally the way Buddhism traveled from here to the end of Taiwan, and then it went further to the end of Malaysia, and it went further to China and Mongolia. It went as far as Korea and Japan and Cambodia and everything, it kept on moving. So there has been any faith will not be contained within a so-called geopolitical and geocultural boundary. It cannot be contained into that. So when this is not acceptable, when this is not acceptable, then definitely there are going to be repercussions from the majority, whether it is as part of the social attack. So most of the attacks in India is social attack, and then which is further taken up by the state apparatus. So you will see a number of cases. In the case of Muslims, you will see the cases are connected with issues like love jihad. There are issues of beef eating. So there are issues of like simple mom lynching. There's issues of when even when the a poor Muslim peddler or a poor Muslim vendor goes on his cart to sell his vegetables or fruits, he's been thrown out, and he's been thrashed and all. And over and above, now you will see, like, even when people keep on bushing and thrashing and killing people using applying violence by the majority section, like the Hindu section, under the aegis of what? What is the argument? So this argument was primarily built by one V.D. Savarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. He wrote a book sometimes in 1921, and before that he was in jail, and then he wrote a apology and pardon, and he sought pardon from the British government, British government in India, and yes, and he promised, he vowed that I will not participate in any freedom movement hereafter. So after that, he was more involved in the activities. So he was one of the founders of Hindu Mahasabha in India, the then British India, and so he wrote a book called Essentials of Hindutva. He wrote a book called Essentials of Hindutva. You can find it even online. That book is still there. What does this book speak? Essentials of Hindutva basically focuses on two concepts, like one is, you know, Pitra Bhumi, like the fatherland, and the second is Punya Bhumi, the holy land. So, and now the Pitra Bhumi is basically the, Matra Bhumi, or, the motherland, which is India, which is a holy land for the Hindu people. So that is the idea that was propagated. So, um, so what exactly is? I mean, then from Savarkar it is carried forward. It is carried forward by the second like Sarsanchalak of RSS. RSS was formed by one of the Hindu Mahasabha members. Uh, you know, uh, Hegdewar, Dr. Hegdewar. He formed RSS in 1925, and after Hegdewar's death, it was Golwalkar who became the head of the institution. And when he writes in his book, "We and Our Nationhood Defined," in that he specifically underlines that we don't need to be wary about the British people. We have to worry about, one, the communists, second, the Muslims, and third, the Christians. So this teaching has gone down the nerve and blood and vein of this country. This has gone down to the lowest level, of society. It runs in the administration. It runs into the administrative setups. RSS built schools to train people to, they build institution in order to train young men and women who could, to enter the administrative cadre as IAS, Indian Administrative Service Officers, IPS, Indian Police Officers, and all the 32 allied services, and then also into the state administrative and the police services. So what I'm trying to say is there is a subtle pattern of declaring someone elite and someone native. But there is another part of it. The part is that there never existed a religion called Hindu religion. What existed was basically they used to call it Sanatan Dharma, which was actually Brahminical religion. So now, who are the ones who are the minorities? Now, let me come to the Christian minority part. When we look at the Christian minority part, and this is also more specifically in the case of Chhattisgarh, which is part of your question. In Chhattisgarh, the major minority one could speak is the Christian minority. So statistically, they make like around 3% of the total population, but unofficially they would make around 6 to 7% of the total population. So even when you look at the Encyclopedia of Christians, there is a section of India, and one definition of Christians in India is what is known as the crypto Christians. So the crypto Christians are more actually in mainland India than the other Christians. So why I'm making these points before you is that I'm trying to build up my case that who are the crypto Christians whom we are talking about. The crypto Christians are those people, or the majority of Christians in India for that reason, like around 92%. One of the surveys speaks very clearly. 92% of people who are Christians in India, they actually hail from Dalit, Adivasi, or backward classes background. So there is the SC, the ST, and OBC background people who are basically there. So there is an enmity in a caste society between the SC, between the ST, I mean like SC and ST and OBC. These are people who are considered as lesser humans. So there is the Brahminical society where the Brahmins and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas who are like like big upper caste, Dvijas, the twice born people. I mean they are like greater beings, and while the Dalit, Adivasi, and OBCs are the lesser humans. So there lies the conflict. So the idea of violence on minorities or discrimination on minorities, it does not fall into the classical category of religious difference. Actually, the difference is socially inbuilt and embedded. So when you talk about the the forms of violence and discrimination on Christian people, and in general and also in Chhattisgarh, it has to do with a lot of you know like a lot of fake cases are filed against Christian believers and pastors and priests. There are attacks on minority institutions, whether it's school or college or hospitals. There are attacks on the social work, and many of the institutions, whether it is a church institution or whether it is the non-governmental, the voluntary organization, the NGOs or church or schools or hospitals, their registration is being cancelled. Their FCRA, the law by which you can receive fund from other sources outside India, that license is cancelled. So you'll see a subtle pattern, and then now there is the new format which RSS and BJP government in India have actually looked upon, is they have entered into the community organizations deep down. For example, if there is a SC or a ST community, so they have entered down and they've instilled this Hindu agenda within the community organizations, and now there are the community themselves are going and attacking their own brethren, their brothers and sisters, breaking the houses, burning of churches, burning of worship places, destroy of their crops, and not letting their dead to be buried. Their dead should be brought back, and then there is a whole set of Ghar Wapsi, or return to home campaign being run by these people. So you'll see, like, it's not just one. It's like, like, it's not just like there are like four directions. It's not like four directional attack. It's like not eight. It's not 32. It's not 64. It's not 128. So one goes and the other comes. That's the method. Every day I get at least 6 to 7 cases on an average of violence on Christians in some form. And the important part is, when I am like, let's assume like I'm a Christian believer belonging to a tribal community, and I'm worshiping my Lord in my home, and I've been attacked by my own fellow brethren, my own brothers are attacking me, same home, same clan people are attacking me, and I'm pleading, and I go to a police station. The police is not charging the ones who are attacking me, but the police is putting up a case against me, saying that I am forcibly converting people. So there are laws in place now. There's a lot of legal impediments, apart from preventing people, and apart from uh, from direct attacks. There are anti-conversion laws in all the states. With regards to Muslims, there are also laws that are put in place, like one of the states which has come up with a anti-hijab law, which says, like, you cannot wear a scarf, a headscarf cannot be worn, or a skull cap cannot be worn by a Muslim student, whether it's a boy or a girl, whenever he or she goes to a school. So this kind of laws. So one is the legal attack. Second is the social attack. So there is the community pressure, and I tell you, the rhythm at the ground. At the ground, I'm not talking about the cities and towns. I'm talking about the most interior of villages that I have been to. So even in those villages, the primary rhythm on the ground is that of a Hindu Rashtra. And these are the I think I've addressed this question, comprehensively, looking at the cultural barriers, and what we are trying to do is, like, we engage at a different level. So this is a very difficult phase, because our own space is diminishing. So as a person engaged in civil liberties, human rights, Dalit rights, Adivasi rights, so we engage as civil liberties organizations, civil rights groups. We engage with such cases. We try to engage with them, with the victims, at the level of extending our compassion. Sometimes, in some cases, we have provided them immediate relief, and in some cases, we have taken the case to the courts. We conduct consistently, we regularly conduct fact-finding investigations, and we also conduct a number of other, paralegal trainings, for such people, particularly for the pastors, the way they have to engage with the police, because every other day they have to engage with the police. So we've been giving paralegal trainings, and also trying to engage with the legal fraternity. But we are trying to look into how can we build a team of lawyers who will be enabled to take up the questions for furtherance. Yeah, I think I am I'm done for now. So
So quickly, sir, moving on to another question, which is again, it will give us an idea about and knowledge about the caste system. So, who are scheduled castes? Who are scheduled tribes? What sets the two groups apart from other backward castes? And what provisions does Indian law have for these communities?
yeah, I'll just explain it in brief. So I have already spoken. So let me tell you what the caste system is all about. The caste system is basically a system of what I call it as, or maybe many others have already spoken about it as graded humanity. So according to the Hindu system, there are like four varnas. I mean, primarily there are four varnas: the Brahmin varna, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and then the Shudra varna. So uh, the the Brahmin is the topmost, and it is assumed like the Brahmin came from the mouth of the Supreme Being, and therefore the Brahmin, whatever he speaks of holy knowledge. Whatever he says is all like valid. And the Kshatriya has come from the arms, which indicate your muscle, which means like he is a warrior clan. And the Vaishya came from the two theories. One says the Vaishya came from the belly, other says from the thigh. Whichever is, whichever is right or wrong. The idea is that because they came from this part of your bodies, it indicates that they have to do the trade, move around, do business and trade and all those things. And the Shudra is supposed to have come from the foot. So the foot. So idea is that the foot, the one who has come from the foot, is supposed to serve on the above. Is to serve the Vaishya, and he has to serve the Kshatriya, he has to serve the Brahmana. So that's basically the idea. Now, when the Varnas got converted into the caste system, what actually happened is the lowest Varna, the Shudra Varna, was, it got divided into two parts. I will not go into too much of detail of it. One was the touchable Shudra, and the other was the untouchable Shudra. So there was a divine divide between the touchable Shudra and the untouchable Shudra. And the touchable Shudras become, of late, become the what we currently call it as the OBC, the other backward class. It's not actually other backward caste, it is other backward classes. That's the official way of looking at it. And the untouchable Shudra, they become the scheduled caste today. So the untouchable Shudra become the scheduled caste, and the touchable Shudra become the other backward classes. Now, this both these terms have a lot to do with the development of violence and discrimination and excommunication and exclusion of this section of people from the Indian society. Broadly speaking, the OBCs, we don't have a perfect statistics, but they constitute somewhere around 46% of the Indian population, the total population. Whereas the scheduled castes constitute around 17% of the total population. So now looking at the case of, so these were the people who were part of the mainland India, the plains, mostly the plains. But when you look at the forests, when you look at the hilly tracts and the forests of India, there was another set of people who lived a life which was not connected with the rest of the country. So those people, they actually were having their own system. I'm not saying like the ones who lived in the plains did not have their own system, but these people, they lived over several generations, so millenniums, like, and finally they built a system of lifestyle along with the environment. So and it is also believed that these people have been the first inhabitants of those areas and lands when they went into the forest, deep into the forest, began living with the wildlife, began living with the flora and fauna, began, having have struggled, much to build a cultural way of life. So that nature-centric, geocentric, cultural pattern of life, which evolved over several centuries, it belongs to a particular section who have been alien to the caste system, and those are the people who have today emerged as the tribal people. So these tribal people or the scheduled tribes, we call them as Adivasis in our local language. So these Adivasi people, I mean, like the Dalit people or the scheduled caste people, they were not according to the Shastras, according to the law of the Brahmana, they were not supposed to hold any property because they were only supposed to give their services. So they were not supposed to hold the property, and they were not supposed to have any kind of wealth. They were not supposed to even have a wife properly. I mean, I don't want to go into details of it, but I can if at all there is time. But whereas on the other hand, the scheduled tribes were landed because the whole of the mountain, the whole of the forest belonged to them. So this is the diametrically opposite, opposite part of the story. Now, also I want to mention it, the scheduled caste people, as per the caste laws, were also made or enforced on to do the menial jobs, whether it is the cleaning of the shit, or whether it is carrying the nice soil, whether it is, I mean, carrying away your dead animals, whether it is, tanning and peeling of the skin from the dead animals, everything was for the scheduled caste. And whether it is also like, being the village messenger. So there were a set of jobs assigned for each caste based on the social layer of that particular caste. So, you understand, I guess. I think you are able to understand what. So each caste, even within the scheduled caste, there were so many different layers. So the lowest among them were the ones who were supposed to carry and clean your excreta. Your shit was carried by them, and the highest may be having a little different kind of a job, but still that person will be untouchable. Whereas the backward classes, the touchable Shudras, were more like service providing classes. Like they were the cattle rearers, they were the ones herding the cows and buffaloes, they were the ones even taking care of the gods, they were the one who were fishing, they were the one who were cleaning inside the house cleaning. So they were more like working in your agriculture field. They were farmers. So you will find, like, they were like the touchable Shudras were the ones who had some, level of engagement and entry. Whereas the untouchables were only doing the menial job. And but now the scheduled castes were alien to this. Now what has happened? How does this three come together? Now here stands a set of people, the Dalits and the OBCs, as historically oppressed by the Brahminical religion. But in the modern parlance of India, right from the British period of India, when the British began to enter into the Adivasi domain, and even after in the post-British India, when the post in British India began to engage and enter into the Adivasi domain. So this was to take and capture their land and forest and the hills and mountains away from them. So this was basically the logic. So then people began to resist. Now today, like 80% of India's mining industry and industrial development is on historically tribal land. I'll tell you a very small, statistics. Like in 1931, in one of the Indian states called Jharkhand, there was almost like 60, 60 or 62 percentage of tribal population. And currently, in the 2011 statistics, the tribal population in that same state has come down to, the number has reversed, 62 has become 26 now. So this is the way the tribal life has been completely dispossessed and dismantled by the modern economics of development. So therefore, historically, oppressed class of people, the Dalits and the OBCs, they are actually, in a way aligning with the historically marginalized and pushed away group, the Adivasis. These are basically the interconnections. Now, there are provisions. There are lots of provisions in the Indian Constitution and other laws. There is a provision against any kind of caste-based atrocities. I'm just quickly, skimming it over. There is a provision. There is a law, not just provisions, a whole law against any atrocities on the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Then there is another set of provisions which aligns with affirmative action, the reservation policy. So there is protection and there is policy for growth. There is also a protection for land rights, particularly in the case of if you look at the specific case of the Adivasi people, the scheduled tribes, you could find that there are specific provisions whereby the Adivasis are allowed and permitted by the Indian Constitution and legal framework that they are allowed to govern their own area. It's like what we call it as self-governance. So there is an act, there is a law in place. So there are provisions in place, but none of the provisions are actually in action. So that is the tragic story of the Dalits and Adivasis and backward classes.
So I'll quickly move on to our another question that is again related to the misrepresentation, or I should say, the reporting, how it's been reported, the issues of these minority communities. So while I was exploring some of the news regarding the portrayal of Maoist struggles in local and international media, I have realized that the issue has not caught up the desired attention. What are the major reasons behind the underreporting of lives lived by India's most deprived communities, and on the other side of India's twist of globalization that has led to many indigenous communities living lives on the edge?
Well, I I would make an initial comment that there is quite a lot of reporting on the question of Maoism. In fact, I would say it is over-reported phenomena, both in local, national, and international media. It's pretty, explicitly reported on the Maoist question. Now, what is Maoism? It is a political ideology based on the thoughts of Mao Zedong of China, which actually looks at the philosophy of Mao in a most narrowest manner, in a very narrow way, where where they call upon the people that revolution happens, from the revolution comes through the battle of gun. So they have picked up the guns and moving in the forest and fighting against the Indian government, Indian state. So I guess that part has been reported. But what has not been reported is what is happening under the aegis of Maoism and anti-Maoist operations. That has not been reported. And because the major reasons are as simple as that, like, if it is reported, India would be pictured across the world for the massive kind of human rights abuses that they are doing against the Adivasi people. Because wherever there are Adivasis, there is resources. Wherever there are, resources in terms of, like, when you call it, use the term resources, it's mineral resources. And mineral resources in the eyes of the corporate sector. So what is essentially is, like, unless you completely eliminate the tribal people, the scheduled tribe people from that particular platter, it is not easy for the corporates to come in and mine that area. So for that, you use kind of it's like a proxy. You use the proxy of Maoism, and you keep on gunning down local population. You keep on arresting people who are against mining industry. You keep on putting them in jail. You slap them with like draconian laws like Unlawful Activities Act. So, like, UAPA is one of the common, like a common law that always being applied on them, whereby it's very natural that even if the trial would start only after like 6 to 7 years, so that is the way. Like, people have been arrested. So many people, even the case of Rima Koregaon, there everybody, like all the 16 of them who have been arrested, are slapped with UAPA. So the idea is like this. The idea is that it is not what is that Maoism is, or the activities of Maoists is not what is not reported. Perhaps the lives of the people who are sandwiched both between the government security forces, the state security forces, and the Maoist, guerrilla army. That position is not reported in the media, and that brings a major, major, major concern. And uh, uh, but on the other end, there would be, you could see, there are few kind of reports which are basically made by people, by the people, the local people. Basically, those are uploaded onto spaces like Facebook and YouTube. However, it has not been able to engage the mainstream media in terms of reporting the truth. It has never come back. The last time when something like that was uh, when something like that has come was when in 2007, in 6 7, there was a 20-minute documentary made by BBC Channel 7, I guess. I'm not sure whether the channel is correctly spelled out, but it's something like that. So after that, there has not been too much of serious reporting. But I would also like to make a point like this, that in India, at least, as much as I understand, there has been a thorough degeneration in the stage of journalism and journalists. They have so thoroughly degenerated to the level that they would only be willing to do the stories being catered by the government agencies and offices. So that is one of the major reasons why it is very difficult for people to be reported. Even if some sensible reporters or journalists would want to do some sort of a reporting of that kind, their editor or coordinator, or even if he or she makes such a report, it will be chopped off at the editorial level. So those kind of complications remains.
Thank you so much, sir, for first of all correcting my information regarding the misreporting. You've rather, connected the dots of how these incidents are not being correctly reported. So yeah, I'm really delightful. So again, the talking about representation, political representation, that is, like democratic values plays a positive role in supporting and raising the voices of certain communities. It has been observed that there is a less representation of Christians in decision making in mainstream politics. Can you please briefly explain what are the main reasons behind less representation of Christians in legislation bodies?
See, let me put it in a slightly different way. Um, let's let's look at like around 60% of the parliamentarians in India at present. They hail from either from OBC or scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. How many of them have raised the question of OBCs or scheduled castes or scheduled tribes in the parliament? You will find like hardly one person, not even one percent, not 1%, one man or woman would have raised these questions. And that too in the whole session of like 5 years, maybe one question like on a fine, moon day. Why I'm saying this is that what happens in a country like India. So I would relate it to I mean the question that you have brought in. The first and foremost thing is that Christians officially constitute around like less than 3% uh, of India's population. So that itself means like in a 140 crore population, Christians are just a minuscule. It's just like a very tiny, tiny minority. The second thing is that uh, the Christians in India, except for the northeast of India, they are like very scattered. They are not, I mean, except for northeast and in one of the southern states, uh, one or two of the southern states perhaps. They're mostly like scattered. They're not in one space or place. So this is diametrically opposite with the Muslim reality. Wherever Muslims are, they are in a compact zone. Of course, there are dangers of like uh, you know that compact zone being could also be easily converted into ghetto, like the Muslim ghetto I've come across in Bombay, I've come across in Delhi. So that is also a danger. But however, Muslims are in a relatively better position. Also, the population size is bigger than that of Christians. So in both the way, um, Muslims are in a better position. So because the Christian population is so much scattered, you would not see that Christians really make an important, social group within a given constituency, whether it is the parliament or its legislative assembly. They do not actually make it to that. Second is that uh, I also have a point which is like a limitation, like Christians have not developed the political bargaining capacity, you know, the political bargaining capacity within within the system and structures of mainstream politics. So that's the second part. And uh, and but I can tell you like there are states like like Nagaland, like Mizoram, Meghalaya, so like these four states I can tell you even chief minister, all the ministers are Christians because it's like 97% Christian, 87% Christian. So there is a statistics that goes alongside that. Other than that, maybe Kerala is one of the states which has got the largest Christian population in terms of number, which constitutes almost 20% of the total population. Apart from that, I do not see a single state which has got that much of either population ratio or otherwise, uh, you know, or otherwise the number ratio. And Christians themselves are not affirmative. I'm also bringing in another problematic. They are not politically affirmative. They are not politically affirmative. Um, I don't know what reasons could be there. There are reasons for they themselves, like they say, like we are not meant for politics. This is not our job. We are here to worship our God. So kind of reasons comes, back and forth. So there is a problem of political, like not being affirmative. There is a problem of, and now coming to the other side of. Now I'll give you another example. In a country like Germany, there is almost like 8% of Turkish Muslims. You know, you understand? There are other Muslims also. There are Muslims from Africa. No, there are Muslims from Arab countries. There are Muslims from many other countries, but there are almost like 7 to 8% of Turkish Muslims. So in a representative democracy, there would be always a thought whereby you will be able to build a representative democracy and to for which the electoral systems are actually responsible for that, to ensure that there is better representation coming from even the smallest of community. And till the 90s, Germany, you won't find any Turkish Muslim being part of the German parliament. But now there are like 6 or 7 of them. It's even beyond. It's beyond actually their population. Um, I think in right now they have even more, like 14 or 15 of them. So why I'm saying this is like they adapted to a very critical, electoral polity, which is called the PR system, the proportional electoral, proportional representation, or the PES, proportional electoral system. Now, why I have to mention this is this is a big problem in India with social groups, with religious minorities, with Dalits, Adivasis, backward classes, and also it is a big problem within the political representation. So what actually, because of that, what actually happens? It is like this. For instance, I am a Christian. Let us assume I am a Christian, and I am elected, or I've been made a candidate of the Congress party. So, and I get elected. So my agenda is not, in fact, to speak for the Christians. My agenda is to speak what the party tells me to speak. So, so there is a dichotomy between these two things. One is that I hail from a party, I hail from a community. My community voted me to win, but my party rules me over my community. So if I have to speak against the Christians, like for example, there is a member of parliament who is a Christian and who is from the BJP. There are a few more Christian, BJP parliamentarians. They don't speak against the violence and against the any of these things that's been unleashed by the BJP members on the Christians in parts of this country. They never speak about it. So the question is, which is important? My people, my community, my society, or my party? So generally in India, there is a party which comes more into space. However, having said all these things, I'm definitely sure that there should be more representation from Christians in the legislative bodies of India, which has not happened, primarily because of the depoliticized approach of the Christian population, and broadly the underestimation of the majority population towards the Christians.
Amazing. All I can say is just amazing the way you explained it. So it's just because of scarcity of time. I'm quickly moving on to the question. So we would now turn our attentions now to the global stage. So, like Christianity is the world's largest religion by population, and if we look at the Western countries, and they are among the decision makers and policy makers. However, if we look at South Asian countries, the Christians are struggling for their basic rights. Why the Christians of West are not raising their voices against the plight of Christians in South Asia?
How can I answer this question? Probably there is a very different approach of the Christians towards their life and the life of others. Of course, the Bible speaks extensively of love your brethren. There is so much of parables and examples that Jesus Christ gave through the scriptures, and that in fact should be adapted beyond barriers. I mean, for instance, like what Jesus speaks about the Good Samaritan story that we all know. Across the world, we all know the Good Samaritan story. The story, in fact, speaks about to love people who are not like you. So it's like, normally the idea of love is like me, my house, my family, my extended family, and my community. So what in that story, the basic angle of the story is to love those people who are not like you, and to engage and to completely kind of in a way what you can call is to end the interracial or intercolor, the intercaste, the interreligious differences that the world and the theological teachings over this discourse has evolved. So basically the idea is basically promotion and and also so. However, I also think over the period of the last century, there is a very powerful teaching which need not essentially adhere to this idea which I am trying to say at the moment, and that teaching comes from a specific section of Pentecostalism in the West. So there is a specific sect within Christianity which has emerged and which has become a global movement at the moment, and that sect believes in kind of prosperity theology. So not to think of others, just be contented within you. God is going to bless you. God is going to give this to you. And the Bible clearly speaks like, do not think like the wealth that you have in this world belongs to you. It's not the wealth that you are supposed to be, holding. I mean, the wealth that you're going to have is in the other world. And on the other way, like there are so many parables which Jesus Christ himself tells to his disciples and to the Pharisees, to and even there are several incidences whenever the rich person comes to him and asks him, what should I do to attain eternal life? And he tells like, go and sell all your property and give it to the people who do not have, to the poor. So the idea of thinking of the poor and oppressed and marginalized is very central to the teaching of Yeshua. However, that has been forgotten has been swept off under the carpet of the prosperity theology that has come through the Pentecostal, like mission or the Pentecostal movement that one could see in the last 1 century. I think that's one of the key reasons. Number two is like many of the states in the West are Christian states. And there is also a question of how seriously can a state engage on the question of an internal crisis. Of course, there is a UN mechanism, there are UPR mechanisms, there are, like so many different mechanisms are in existence, but there are also limitations in terms of how much, to what extent. All these all these nations or all these UN bodies and the mechanism have the limitation in terms of like suggestion, providing suggestion, but they cannot ensure whether those suggestions are implemented or not. I mean, when you give a suggestion, I would say, okay, sir, I accept it. Yeah, it was my mistake, I'll correct it. But there is no mechanism in place which would ensure the implementation of those solutions. So there is a limitation as a state, like for instance, like Germany or Italy or France or US for that reason, there is a limitation. Of course, recently, I mean, of course, that condition, what's that, religious freedom conditions have been always criticized by the US Commission on Religious Minorities and all those questions. But the problem is that, they can only criticize and put some sort of barriers and sanctions, but they cannot ensure that it will be implemented. So there are limitations for the nation, and there are limitation. There is a limitation of the new theology. There is a limitation for the nation, and the third thing is there are some people who would like to actually raise these questions, but they are themselves a minuscule minority in their own countries, because they would be speaking more about the idea of freedom, which is again one of the key core concepts of Bible's teachings. Love and freedom goes hand in hand. Love, justice, and freedom are so consciously inscribed in the scriptures. So these people who want to raise, they are themselves a minority within the Christian sections in their own countries. So there, and also they are also like limitations in terms of institutional support mechanism, which is right now so difficult in countries like Asia. But at the same time, I also have another take with, I mean, like the South Asian countries are predominantly having the social system of caste, whether it is India or Pakistan or Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. And as such, the moment you start raising the voices of violence on minority people, whether it's a Christian or the Muslim minorities, the question of caste will certainly surface. There cannot be any, like for instance, like in India, we have a whole section of Muslims who are basically known as Pasmanda Muslims. And who are the Pasmandas? Who are the basically the backward class and the Dalits who have embraced Islam. And why did Dalits and the Adivasis embraced Christianity or Islam? Is basically to move out of the idea of caste. And for instance, like the Adivasis, they themselves have been telling like time and again, like they find a different approach towards life itself in Christianity, for instance. So when you want to escape the idea of caste, and there is a religion in place, and when you challenge that religion from the international level, it is actually attacking the idea of caste itself. So that is actually going to create more. So India also makes sure right now, India is also making sure that these issues do not come to the major platforms at the international level, where there's a question of where there's a question of attack on Christian minorities, or the attack on Muslim minorities, where there's a question of caste discrimination on Dalits, where there's a question of dispossession of Adivasis from their land, forest, and resources. These four things, the state, the Indian government, do not want to surface in any forums at all. So they make sure that these key areas are not being brought into the picture. So there's a lot of pressure politics at one end. At the same time, there is pressure from here and there is pressure from there. There is a question of theological outlook, but those who have a theological outlook to support and help people in distress, they are limited and their resources are limited. And those institutions who want to support now cannot enter India because many of them are either banned or their receivers have lost the FCRA license. And the fourth thing in this series is that the state, the governments have a limit to push the agenda to the Indian state.
Thank you so much, sir, for providing a detailed insight about why these countries are not directly involving themselves. Again, it's they can only suggest. And talking about suggestion, I also have a follow-up question on that suggestion as well. So I'm again now moving towards the contribution that Christians had in South Asia. It is kind of diminishing these nowadays. So Christian in India had contributed significantly for the socio-economic uplifting of the communities in the 19th century. Christians community in India changed the way many backward people lived and supported significantly to socio-economic growth into countries' social work. It's a different story now after the inception of India. Why the participatory role of Christians community has been declining.
There is, as I said, like there are so many restrictions being imposed. They are losing their license. Their institutions are attacked. The schools are being shut down under some pretext. Some pretext they would be shutting down. They the foreign contribution licenses have been withdrawn by the Indian state, and and there is lot. It's not, as I said, like it is not just one-sided attack. It's like so many attacks at the same time, and there are multiple factors. So one is that, as I said earlier, like what is essential is to look at, as Goldberger said, to look at, among others, to look at Christians as an enemy. So that the idea is, you should ensure like how to deal with the enemy, whether it is to kill them, whether it is to attack them, whether it is to demolish their houses, whether it's to demolish the institutions and put sanctions on the bigger ones and demolish the smaller ones. That kind of policy is going on. And whoever is ready to come back, let them come back. There is Ghar Wapsi also. So it's a complete package. So I do not think the role has been diminished or it is declining. In fact, the role has increased. There are more Christian, hospitals that has been coming up. There are more schools, more institutions being established. Even today, some of the best, educational institutions in India are run by the Christian minority managements. The best of the medical institutions in the India are run by Christian, institutions. So I do not think it is diminishing, but there is more, barricades being created. There is more hurdles being created for an easy go. So I think like it is not declining, but it is presented in the negative light in the national, regional, and I mean right from the local to state to national and international media. It is presented in a negative light most of the time. Like sometimes you'll present like a church, like a hospital exists only to convert the people in that area. Or a school, through the school, you are converting, young boys and girls. So, it is being presented. But there's a counter conversion which is going on among all the Adivasi people, which is basically done by RSS to the network of some 650 schools across the country. 700 schools, in fact, they have across the country, which is the Saraswati Sishu Mandir, the Bal Bharati network. So it is actually converting the Adivasis and Dalits as Hindus, which otherwise they historically were not. And many of the chief ministers have spoken outrightly, like for instance, Adivasis are not Hindus.
Absolutely. So we are just two more questions. Again, talking about the transformation. South Asian countries are gradually heading and adopting the democratic values and norms. Unfortunately, on the other hand, many of them are stifling, dissenting, sidelining civil institutions, and making minorities second-class citizens. Do you think that is it an attempt to straining democracy?
Yeah, it's strangling democracy. It's like it's like what you in Hindi call it as like Jantantra ka gala घोटना. It's actually strangling democracy completely. Now, in fact, at least as much as I know in India, um, not just perhaps in India, but many of the South Asian countries, as you have mentioned, like uh, the See, I mean, a good democracy would always welcome criticism, and they would be happy to welcome criticism to the core. And you can outrightly criticize XYZ. But a democracy like India is now trickling down to just papers, elections, and institutions. So it is democracy becomes a real democracy. This is what Dr. Ambedkar said while presenting the constitution. Yeah, like he said two things, like a good constitution can be completely misused by a set of bad people. I'm not quoting it exact words, but this is what the sense is. A good constitution can be completely destroyed in the hands of bad people, and a bad constitution can be a good thing for people when it is in the hands of good people. So he was looking at the idea of good and bad. And also he said, like, we are today entering into a new phase of political democracy. But this political democracy will become a reality only when we have social democracy. So there is no social democracy that we have in this country. We don't have social democracy. It's not like the social democracy that people think in the West. The social democracy which Ambedkar spoke about, he wrote about it consistently in many of his writings and books, is basically, I mean, like social endosmosis. He speaks in Annihilation of Caste about social endosmosis. And what is this endosmosis? Endosmosis is a chemical process where two different elements, come together and it becomes a new element. So the old identity is lost and a new identity is acquired by the two. So that's what Dr. Ambedkar always said, that, I mean, how can we have a social endosmosis when two different people from two different community naturally comes together to become a third, or losing the Purana, the old caste, and becoming a new humanity. So that new humanity is actually getting lost in the whirlwind of a fascist humanity. So what happens in a fascist humanity? Your democratic values are curtailed. Your voices are curtailed. You even, whatever everything of yours is presented in as bad and center of evil. Your religion, your language, your culture, your people, your community, your dressing, your eating, your food, everything is evil, devil. Everything is like the center of devility. Like, for example, beef eating is considered as a huge crime in Indian states, in many states. And uh, and and uh, but but and they call, the cow as mother goddess, like, Gau Mata. So but this mata is like roaming on all the streets, blocking the roads, consistently creating accidents. Lots of people, thousands of people die because of this same mata. So, I mean, it's like, there is no consideration for human life. So where there is no consideration for human life, there is no consideration for historically oppressed people. There is no consideration for historically marginalized people. There is no consideration for the minorities. Then it is natural that you are actually, you are strangling strangling the idea of democracy. So the idea of democracy only coexists. It becomes a reality only when there is the idea of justice and equality and liberty and fraternity. So justice, equality, liberty, fraternity. This was also the underlying slogan laid by Dr. Ambedkar while drafting the constitution, and even before that, and even after that. So what I mean, like why I'm bringing in this is, like, democracy is, it doesn't exist in vacuum. Democracy exists in the strength of coexistence of people. the strength of how groups, social groups coexist with each other. How naturally, you are enabled to marry a girl, how naturally you are enabled to marry a man from another caste and society without looking at whether his parents happen to be a scavenger or his parents happen to be a priest in the church or temple.
So yeah, absolutely. So moving back to our last question, which again you've spoken about earlier, that countries can only suggest, Western countries especially can only suggest, they cannot implement. So there's a follow-up question. As the religious freedom conditions have significantly worsened in the past couple of years, United States Commission of International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, in this regard, published an annual report on countries of particular concern, CPC, that is of 2021, where it recommended the US government, and I quote, that designate India as a country of political concern or CPC for engaging and tolerating systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedoms, as defined by the International Religious Freedom Act, which is IRFA. How would you take that? What would be your opinion in this regard?
See, the country of particular concern is like I've already mentioned it, like, but that doesn't actually help the minorities living in this country. It doesn't help a Muslim, doesn't help a Christian, doesn't help even a Dalit, it doesn't help an Adivasi. So, like whether it can convert into some strict and stringent actions on the ground, whether the US, based on this, has the capacity and power to like to take off India's name from some of the international forums, to can they recommend India to be out of some forums on the UN friends? So these are actually, and also like putting up some sort of a restrictive economic sanctions, or some, like suspending the bilateral agreements. Some sort of actions would be much more needed beyond this, announcement of CPC. I'll tell you what. I'll give you another example. Um, uh, UPR, now we just finished the UPR 4 for India. So in the UPR, like from the beginning, the UPR 1, they were like, I think like less than 20 recommendations to the government of India. I guess I assume you know the UPR, the Universal. I completely agree to what you say. I've been part of the working group on human rights in India, so I've been very much following this thing. So I mean, like if you see the first UPR that was in 2000, I mean, every country has a different cycle. So the UPR of India was first was in 2008, then followed by the second UPR, which was in 2012, I guess. That was a second cycle. Then the third cycle was in 2016,
16.
and the fourth was, yeah, and fourth was supposed to be um, in 2020, 20 or 21. I think it was 16, but it extended to 17. But yeah, then it was 21, and because of all this COVID and all, that was considered for 22. So what I'm trying to say is that every UPR, every round, every cycle, you will see that the number of recommendations being brought in by the member countries, it is increasing in India. So you'll see consistently it is increasing. So every time India would commit before the UN body that they're going to take action, they're going to do some kind of, they're going to bring in some laws for that, but it never happens. It never happens. So they will bring in a very, very, I mean, they will also bring in a law which would like be actually very fake kind of a law. It won't even be you won't be able to even count it as a law, you know. So they will bring in a law which would be, I mean, factually and actually very fake. It would only have the title, like, like for instance, I'll give you an example, uh, like, like, I mean, there was like one recommendation in 2012, which was on the kind of violence on children, you know, violence on minor children, and then I mean, thanks, like at least it was brought in by the, like earlier Congress government, and one of the key areas, violence on children, was basically connected to sexual offenses. That was one of the key areas that the UN body has brought in. And so when this thing was already going on, and then the recommendation came, and then immediately the Indian representative stood up and said, we have already brought in a new act to protect the children, and that's basically the protection of children from sexual offenses in 2012. So, but that is actually a better act than what I'm trying to say. It is a way better act than any other act. So there are some actions being taken by the previous government in place, but at the same time, it is very difficult to think or even to dream about any changes, or even for any kind of acceptance and implementation, ground level action of any recommendation by a government, which is actually nothing but in the name of democracy. It is a mockery of democracy. In the name of governance, it is extending and expanding its fangs and teeth of fascism to the cultural, nationalism. That's one of the key recommendations given to them by, Goldberg. So Goldberg said, like, it's like one nation, one religion, one culture, one language. So it's like Hindu nation, Hindu religion, Hindu Sanskriti, and Hindi Bhasha. So that's basically where it is. So I'll stop it, like, where the religious freedom, it is not about just religious freedom, it's also about individual freedom. It's more about, your personal liberty. Your liberty is at stake. Your freedom, it's not just a violation of religious freedom, it's also the violation of your personal, your individual, your citizenry liberty. Your right as a citizen is completely dismissed and dispossessed. That's what is at stake in India at the moment. It's been
So,
also a very amazing thing that you have invited me to speak before you. And really, I'm honored, and